Good evening, everybody. My name is Chase Tucker. I'm an adventure enthusiast and a high altitude training coach, and I run a business called Basecamp Adventure Fitness, where we prepare people for all facets of their trips, including their actual trip selection, their gear and equipment, as well as their mental and physical preparation. World Expeditions have invited me in tonight to have a chat about what it is I do, and also so I can provide some recommendations for those who are aiming to go into the high Himalayas and other high altitude areas. I'll be speaking for about 10 minutes, and we'll have time for some questions at the end. Just before I get started, I want to show you a quick video just as a bit of a softener, because I know some of you probably, if you're planning trips, a little bit nervous or apprehensive about heading into the high mountains, and certainly I know I was the first time that I went to the Himalayas. But really there's nothing to be that worried about as long as you've got a pretty good level of fitness and you've prepared. The Himalayas are really open to anyone, and that's what I'm trying to demonstrate
We
in this
are
video.
at the Rongla Pass, and it was a killer getting up here. There was like at least three just coals that we just passed that we thought were going to be it, but it wasn't, and it was really heartbreaking, and my chest felt like it was going to explode. But now we're here. Sign says, see you again. I don't really know if that's true, but once is good enough for me, I think. I hear mules coming as well.
Always preferred going down. Look at the mules. So just to give you a bit of perspective, Danny's never done anything too adventurous or any strength training before she met me, and I spent a few weeks with her getting her physically and mentally prepared for this trip, as I wanted her to enjoy it just as much as I did. Obviously she found it challenging, probably being a little bit over dramatic there, saying her chest is exploding. Sometimes it can feel like that at altitude. But she managed to climb to 2/3 the height of Everest without too many dramas. So just as an example, with a little preparation, a lot is achievable. Dan mentioned before, there's clients on World Expeditions trips from anywhere from 16 through to 75. So if you prepare, you really have nothing to worry about. So tonight I'm going to be speaking to you about the major barriers that can stop you from enjoying your trip or getting to your goal. And your goal might be to get to the top of Kalapatar, or it might be to be that person on the way up to Namche Bazaar that's got a big smile on their face, and the incline isn't bothering them. Or you might want to get over that pass and really experience the high Himalayas. So I'm going to be speaking about the things that you can do to help you prepare, and the major barriers that may get in the way of your goals. And I like to categorize them into things that you can't control and things you can control. And some of the things you can't control, obviously we won't spend too much time on these, but there's the weather. That's a major factor that can stop you from getting to a summit. The group dynamics, if you're your trek leader, if you're going with a group, will determine when you go up and when you go down. And it's important to follow their recommendations. And altitude. Now this is a funny one. And in the past people have said that it's completely out of your hands and there's no point preparing for it. I have a different view of that, which I'll discuss shortly. But the things you can control, I like to categorize them as the 3 Fs: feet, food, and fitness. They're the most integral things to understand before we consider heading into the high Himalayas or high mountains. So firstly, with food. Now the food in Nepal is of excellent quality, but because of the environment and because of the soil, there's a lack of fresh fruit and vegetables in the Himalayas. So I generally tend to tell people to supplement with a multivitamin if they're going into the Himalaya, especially if they're going for an extended period of time. Now, personally, I love Nepalese food, and what the Sherpa predominantly eat is dal bhat. There's a photo of it up there on the slideshow. And that's a very simple dish of rice and lentil soup. This is actually a perfect trip for this perfect dish for this environment, as it's really high in carbohydrates, which is the fuel that your body needs when it's under the stresses of being in this environment. And you could be burning up to 15,000 calories a day, so you're really going to need to fueling up. But this dramatic change from a Western diet to dal bhat can often be confronting, and often the Westerners will opt for the Western option. Now, this is in terms of if you're trekking independently, and World Expeditions, their catering team are amazing, so all the Western options are fantastic. But if you're trekking individually and you're at the tea houses in the Himalayas, I strongly recommend you just stick to dal bhat, just because it's a great way to fuel your body with carbohydrates. And this Sherpa are excellent at cooking this meal. I can't say they're that good at cooking Western food, and it ends up being pretty disagreeable in the bowels sometimes, and I've heard plenty of stories about it. So that's my recommendation. Avoid the burritos at all costs. No burritos, please, people. Unless you're prepared, unless you're used to eating Indian and Nepali food with spices and lentils and curries, that sort of thing, that can be an additional stress on your body that you just don't need when you're potentially under a lot of other physical stress at the time. Hopefully not mental stress. It's supposed to be a very peaceful environment. But what I recommend to all my clients is to use this as part of your training, and you can download a recipe from my website, basecampfit.com, for a recipe for dal bhat that a good friend of mine gave me, and prepare this and get your body used to using this as a fuel. And that can mean the difference between an enjoyable trek and a 2-week-long nightmare, really. Once your body's used to using that as a fuel, it's just going to be, you're going to be performing better because your body's used to assimilating that. So that's my number one tip. Get on the dal bhat, learn how to cook it, learn to love it. Okay, moving on to the second F, and that's feet. If you've read any trekking or hiking blog, they'll stress the importance of choosing the right boot to fit your feet and wearing them in thoroughly, of course. And while that's sound advice, I'd also like to point out the importance of your sock-shoe combination, as it's really the environment within the shoe that creates discomfort, and it's mostly determined by the choice of your sock. I'm a bit of a sock nerd. I've tried every trick under the sun from a young age to prevent blisters, and now I only wear natural fibres on my feet. Predominantly, that's 100% merino, or perhaps a wool synthetic blend, depending on what I'm doing. Now, wool breathes very well. It's naturally antimicrobial, so it doesn't stink. It stays warm when it's wet, so you do happen to get wet feet, you'll still stay warm. And it dries very quickly, so you can actually wash them and hang them out in the tea house, and they'll be dry the next morning, ready to go. But I always tell my clients, look at it, investing it almost as much in your socks as you do in your shoes, and you certainly wouldn't regret that. I'm yet to see anyone jettisoning wool socks out of their pack in a desperate attempt to shed weight. I'm sure you'll use them when you get back anyway, but I would suggest taking 3 to 5 pairs of really good quality socks. Ensure they're anatomically shaped, which means you have a sock for the left and right foot, and that minimises the spare space within the sock, and it's really that space and the rubbing that causes the blisters. So that's something you really don't want to have when you're in the mountains. Now, last but certainly not least is fitness, and this is obviously something that's very close to my heart as a personal trainer who works solely with people heading into the mountains. Now, the question that I'm most often asked is, do I really have to train for this? Well, my answer to that is, do you really have to train for a half marathon or even the Bridge to Brisbane? Well, plenty of people don't, but I reckon they would probably enjoy it more if they did. And if you're interested in enjoying your trek, I would suggest doing some serious training beforehand. Now, as I demonstrated earlier, the Himalayas are open to almost anyone with a good level of general fitness. However, the fitter you are, the more you're going to enjoy your trek. Preparing physically is also going to reduce your chance of injury, which can be a devastating thing to happen if you've spent so much time and effort and planning that goes into these sorts of trips, not to mention the price tag of a potential evacuation on top of your trip expenses. And really, the more prepared you are, the easier you're going to find the trek and the more you're going to enjoy it. Also, if you've been doing strength training, you're going to find your muscles will deal with this a lot better, and you're not going to wake up with muscle soreness every day, which is one of the big reasons a lot of my clients come to me. So when should I start to train? That's a big question. Well, generally I say if you have a pretty good level of fitness and you have low lifestyle stresses and you generally eat well, then 10 to 12 weeks of preparation is usually plenty to get people fit for the mountains. On the other hand, if you have a sedentary job, you don't eat too well, you haven't done any resistance training previously, you don't play any sport, then I'd recommend 6 to 10 weeks pre-preparation phase to get your general fitness up to scratch. Then you're looking at 10 to 12 weeks of specific strength training with loads of time hiking on local trails just to get you mountain fit. And really, the best thing to do is make your training realistic. So copy the trekking environment that you're going to as much as possible. Now, by this I don't mean putting on a duck down suit and turning the air conditioning down to -10 and walking on a treadmill. What I mean by that is getting out into the real environment, taking on mud, scree, snow, ice potentially. These are the things you're going to have to deal with, and that's really going to make the joints and the muscles strong and stable, and you're going to be able to manage these obstacles without injury. That's some of the things that we work on with our clients. Leg strength, core strength, basic skills. Posture and movement quality is really important. You have a look at how the Nepali or the Sherpa people carry their packs and how they walk. They're very upright, they stand very tall, and that's how we teach our clients to walk. Movement quality is, of course, very important, and their balance and agility, whatever they need to focus on. And do plenty of hiking on the weekends. Like I said, most important. So lastly, altitude, and this is probably something that's on your mind, and certainly something that was on my mind the first time I went to the Himalayas. In the past, everyone has had this attitude that there's nothing you can do about altitude. The previous belief was that it was determined by genetics and other mystery factors, and that's still true. But we still don't understand why. One day you can perform really well at altitude, and on the other day you can be affected so badly to the point that it threatens your life. And I've experienced that. I've had good days and bad days, and certainly there's been times where I've been at nearly 6,000 meters and felt great. I just felt, I had my A game, and then other times I've been at, 3,000 or 4,000 and felt terrible. And it's something we need to do more research into. But that's not to say that you can't prepare for it. And really, my attitude towards this is just know your enemy, and knowledge is your best weapon, and especially knowledge of your body. So by experiencing simulated altitude and by understanding how it affects our minds and particularly our bodies as individuals, then you'll have the advantage of being able to recognize your body's limitations. And that's something which could potentially save your life in the mountains, knowing when to go down, knowing when to stop and say, no, that's it, I need an acclimatization day, or, no, I'm fine, I've got a light headache, but I can push on. It's really about knowing your own body and your limitations. Some of the things you can do to prepare for altitude, we use pulmonary resistance. So you can see on the slideshow there's a device there that Megan's using to reduce the amount of air flow into her lungs, which increases the surface area and the elasticity in the alveoli, which is a fancy way of saying you use your oxygen more efficiently. We can also head into an altitude room. We have access to a $500,000 facility in Morningside in Brisbane, where we are able to get clients exercising in the room, and they're able to feel the effects of altitude and really recognize how it affects their body. The simplest thing you can do is interval training, and so that's working very hard for a short period of time, and then a quick rest or active recovery, and that's been proven to increase endurance much faster than just doing steady state cardio. And it's also been proven to increase your VO2 max or your oxygen efficiency. So there's plenty of things you can do to give you the best chance of avoiding altitude sickness. But obviously the best piece of advice I can give you is just to go at your own pace, listen to your body. Naturally trekking is something that's done slowly, and just enjoy it and take your time. Don't let anyone push you or rush you. So there you have it. That's my top tips for preparing for a trek in the Himalayas. If you'd like to leave your email address, I can send you a copy of these tips along with my ebook, which is coming out very soon, which will give you a good structure to build your own program. And if you have any other questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. I offer a free trek consultation for an hour. I'll sit down with you and go through all your trip preparation, go through a few fitness tests, and then I provide you with some recommendations of the sort of training that you should be doing in order to get you base camp fit. That's it for me, guys. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be out here to answer them.